Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, January 11th. This is the Public Safety Committee of the Los Angeles City Council. Councilman Smith, Chairman, and joined by Council Members Cardenas and Perry. And Mr. Zine is on his way. While Mr. Zine is on the way up, we'll go ahead and dispense with item number 2, which will be continued. Did we have a time to continue that too, or just continued?
Continue.
Just continue until the department notifies us? All right. We'll continue that until the department notifies us. Items 8 through 15 are graffiti awards that will be on consent. And items 5 through 7 are donations. If there are no questions, I just have one question. Is there someone here from the fire department on these items? You here on these items, sir? Or? Yes, sir. Okay. Question just was...
Come on up.
It's item number 5, and it's just an issue that Mr. Parks continued to bring up, mostly the police department. Good job, police department. You're not on the grill today. As I look at the record on this, the command was notified of the award of the donation in October.
Yes, sir.
It did not get to the commission till December, exactly 2 months later. And then the mayor got it here in 2 days, and we got it here actually the first meeting after we were notified. What took the staff so long and the commission so long to move this along?
It's my understanding the fire commission is meeting only once a month now, which delayed the process somewhat.
Right.
But it's been very expedient since then.
All right, so that's a good explanation. Thank you very much. We've been asking some time about why these check awards and grants, et cetera, take so long to get here. And so we're trying to tighten that schedule up and get these moving as fast as possible. Rarely is there a problem, but I think once in the last 6 years I can recall there was one issue about a check acceptance that we had a lot of questions about, so we want to make sure that we do this in a timely manner. So if you can get them any faster, that would be appreciated.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Without objection, then, 5 through 7 will be also approved.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. That'll take us to regular agenda. Item number 1.
John White, City Clerk. Item 1, City Attorney and CO reports relative to a right response cooperative agreement with Peace Over Violence for the period October 8, 2008 to September 30, 2011, for services to be provided to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault who are deaf, hard of hearing, and or physically disabled.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm Eve Sheedy from the City Attorney's Office. I'm the Director of Domestic Violence Policy. I'm the representative of the office participating in this grant, so I'm here if you have any questions.
Okay.
Ida Rubio with the City Administrative Office. I'm also here if you have any questions.
One question I had is, it said we're talking about years 2 and 3. Is there any report on where we are in 2 and 3?
I tried my hardest, actually, to get that information before today's meeting by talking to the financial person at Peace Over Violence, and unfortunately, I don't have that information. I believe that the goal is for the funding to go up because the time commitment is going to increase, but I don't have the numbers in front of me. I apologize.
What is the essence of what is expected to take place in years 2 and 3, and what's the backdrop of what took place in year 1? Because year 1 has already passed, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The grant is unusual, and the steps that are required by OVW are very specific. So you have to go through the steps of creating a charter, a needs assessment, and an implementation plan. And their mantra through the grant process is the product is in the process. So it's a very in-depth process of creating a collaboration, making a chart of what we're going to do, doing a needs assessment citywide, and then an implementation to change. And the idea is to do systems change, not to do specific training, things like that.
So year 1 is a plan,
Now,
basically.
year 1, we worked on the charter.
Okay.
It's a group writing process, which is slow and aggravating, but we're almost done, and it has to go through OVW. So we're just about done with that, and we've started the beginning of the needs assessment.
Okay. So we're almost complete on the year 1 activity.
Right, although OBW doesn't divide it like that per year, they just want you to do those things. So through year 2, generally speaking, will be the creation, dissemination, and analysis of the needs assessment citywide to determine what services are needed or not being provided or being provided for these particular populations. And then we develop an implementation plan, and it roughly falls into those divisions.
And also, who is the target constituency that we're looking to serve?
It's people who are deaf, hard of hearing, and disabled who are victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and it's all victims, men and women, anybody who falls into those.
Men, women, and children.
Correct. Anybody who fits into those categories of the deaf, disabled, or hard of hearing.
Okay. Now, that being the case, I've been working very closely with the deaf and hard of hearing community and the disabled community as well. So, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is instruct the CAO and the Department on Disability and LAPD to report back to the Public Safety and or the ITGA committee, which I chair, with the costs associated with a possible upgrade of the current assistive technologies for the deaf and hard of hearing. If we're going to be working specifically with a community, we certainly have to be able to communicate with them at their level and in a fashion in which they feel comfortable to communicate with us.
Right, and we have GLAD as one of our
Yes.
members, so we're very sensitive to that.
And also, while you're at it, GLAD is certainly an organization that's very well involved in this community of Los Angeles, but there's also other organizations that have a lot of breadth of reach. For example, in Chairman Smith's district, we have Northridge University, and they're very involved, and they have a deaf and hard of hearing, a lot of activity, and probably one of the largest constituencies being served by that university right here in our backyard. Outside of Gallaudet University, I think we're probably number 2, and Gallaudet is specifically focused to that population as a whole.
So part of what we'll do, and I'll make sure that as we distribute the needs assessment, that we include the people at Northridge within the needs assessment to get their input into what systems improvements need to be made.
And in addition to the possible upgrade costs and what it would take for us to get up to speed, also if they could do an assessment on where we're at relative to Title III of the American Disabilities Act when it comes to those communication systems.
I'll do my best.
Yes, thank you.
And you can get a copy of that from Mr. Cardenas's office. And John needs a copy too. Okay. Ms. Perry? Mr. Zine, we're on item number 1.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, that being the case, we have one public comment on item number 1. Stanley Green, come forward, please. How are you today?
Hi, thank you. I'm Stanley Green with the Men's Health Network, which is a national organization that ensures the health and well-being broadly defined of men and boys and the people who care about them. And while I checked oppose, that's just because of the limitations on the box. It's not so much that we oppose this grant, but I didn't have a general comment. I do have a specific comment. There is a history of specific discrimination against male victims of domestic violence and sexual assault within that field, as was indicated in the Woods case on which the California Court of Appeals ruled in October 2008. As many of you know, California law actually defined domestic violence only as something that a man did to a woman up until that ruling, which is really appalling. And it's also, if you look at the way that, how many of you have ever seen a domestic violence poster that shows a male victim or a female perpetrator? You know, if somebody is always characterized as a member of the perpetrator group, whether it's by race or gender, they're not going to feel comfortable reaching out to that organization for help. My concern with this grant and with any grants dealing with domestic violence is that in the context of this history of discrimination, there need to be advocates from organizations with a history of advocating for overcoming this kind of discrimination in the needs assessment and in the design of the program. And I don't see that in this. Ms. Sheedy, as an individual, is very strongly committed towards ending this discrimination. But the design of the program, I'm talking about systemic issues here, not personality issues. I really support the work Ms. Sheedy does. But the systemic issue is that there are no representatives of groups who have a history of advocating for male victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in the design of this program or pretty much any programs that come before the City of Los Angeles. And in fact, the Office on Violence Against Women, think about it for a moment.
Go ahead.
Okay, the 92% of workplace deaths occur to men, but we don't have a men's occupational safety and health administration. We have OSHA, not MOSHA. And OSHA is every bit as concerned about safety of women in the workplace as about the safety of men in the workplace, even though women are a minority of workplace fatalities. The historical reason why we have an Office on Violence Against Women, or the historical reasons why we had battered women's shelters, was because women were the majority of victims. But majoritarianism could exclude, in many communities, serving Latinos or African Americans where there's a white majority. We don't do that. We don't exclude serving people with hearing disabilities because they're a minority. And we don't exclude them from the marketing and the outreach. So what I'm saying is there's a systemic problem, and unfortunately this grant, which comes from an organization in D.C., which itself reflects this discrimination in its very name and its policies, is a problem. I mean, I don't think the City of Los Angeles would accept a grant that said you had to discriminate against African Americans. And I'm not saying this grant says you have to discriminate, but in fact, the guidelines from the OVW for some of their funding says, well, yes, you can serve male victims. The funding can only go to programs that are designed primarily to serve women. How about if it said, yes, you can serve Latino victims, but only in programs that are designed primarily to serve white people? It's the same issue. Discrimination on the basis of race, religion, and gender, in my opinion, are morally equivalent.
Ms. Reed? Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you very much. For me, that was very enlightening, and it's a reminder of a lot of the biases that we have in policy that we still have yet to address. First of all, who are you working with on the federal level to get them, for example, to change OVW and various departments, specifically the department that we're dealing with here?
The Men's Health Network has for many years been trying to get an office on men's health established in the...
But wait a minute, who are you working with? Is anybody being receptive when it comes to a U.S. Senator or a congressperson or somebody high up in the new administration that is saying, you know what, this is an issue we're going to work on now?
Well, as you may know, the new administration appointed an office on women and girls issues, but has not appointed an office on men and boys issues. So this bias, which is known as misandry, that's the equivalent of misogyny.
Okay, look, okay. I get it. You've already made that point.
All right.
And I think you're speaking the truth. But I'm asking you a question. I'm trying to be helpful.
Yes.
Do you have somebody who has said, and it looks like they're willing to champion this issue in Washington when it comes to somebody high up in the president's office? And you got to be quick because we're not going to spend too much more time on it. Or a congressperson or a U.S. senator.
We don't have that kind of support yet.
Okay. All right. You're welcome to talk to Michael De La Rocha in my office.
Okay.
And then we'll try to reach out and find out why no one seems to have stepped up and wants to work on this. But specifically to the issue of this grant, it sounds like you've had some pretty good communication with the people in Los Angeles in voicing your concerns.
Yes.
And your efforts to try to make it much more inclusive than what Washington seems to be asking of us. How receptive do they seem to be to that so far with you?
Many of the individuals in Los Angeles are receptive, but we are encountering delays, some of which was because of the funding crisis that occurred. Sure. We're trying to move forward.
No, but I'm talking about your comfort level that we're paying attention to what you're saying, and we're going to try to design this. Like you said, outreach is important, right? If you're doing, for example, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I know I'm taking a while, but if we're doing outreach, for example, heavily to the Latino community because an issue we know is affecting them more than anybody else, right?
Right.
That certainly isn't addressing the issue of men and boys like you're talking about, right? Maybe Latino men and boys, but not generically all men and boys. Mm-hmm. My question to you is, do you feel as though they're receptive to your points and they're going to try to at least incorporate some of these things, or do you think they're just listening? Because you're very articulate, and I think what you're saying is very true. It's hard for somebody to dispute what you just said. I think everything you said is very true.
Thank you.
But do you feel as though they're being receptive so far to try to incorporate as much as they can of that, or more than in the past?
There is progress, sir, but I think there can be more progress, and particularly progress in including advocacy organizations on this issue. There are advocacy organizations for people with hearing impairments in this project as well. There should be. But there isn't as much progress as we need on including organizations with advocacy dealing specifically with this gender issue.
Okay, thank you.
Respond?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm well aware of Mr. Green and the people he works with. There has been, I will tell you, on this particular grant, which is not a collaboration that we chose, we were asked to participate. The Domestic Violence Service Agency involved Rainbow Services. The executive director is male. So I'm saying they not only have they were chosen because their history of addressing the issues of disabled, deaf, and hard of hearing victims of domestic violence has been good, so they were part of this collaborative.
Okay, but what organization are you part of, sir?
Men's Health Network.
Men's Health Network.
Yes.
Is there anything that precludes us for incorporating Men's Health Network formally, like this other Rainbow organization?
Yes, there is.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes,
There is?
Yes.
There's something that precludes us from including them?
Yes.
Oh, really? Tell me about that.
The grant, we are not the lead agency on the grant. The grant was applied for by a group, a collaborative, and granted to that collaborative. It is my understanding that that's the collaborative that's been working and that is designed to work on this project. What I explained to Mr. Green is that part of the goal of the project is, one of the things is this needs assessment. The needs assessment will help to evaluate some of the things that Mr. Green talks about, which is the community. I will tell you, I'm extremely active in the domestic violence community here and statewide, et cetera, and we are trying to work with people who work in Mr. Green's organization and others to define the scope of the problem. So this particular grant will work to do that. And we are not excluding men. They are not organizations that historically discriminate. That's an improper characterization.
Look, I appreciate you wanting to clarify that people are easily attacked in this building, especially when we're dealing with politics or what have you. So I understand what you're trying to clarify, but that's really not my point. I'm not here to attack anybody or individual or organization or what have you, but I find it hard to believe that the federal government would provide us with a grant. And granted, we may have preliminarily included who the collaborative organizations are, specifically A through Z, but I find it hard to believe that they would not allow us to add additional collaborative members to that list. Secondly, I'm not asking that we bifurcate, if there's funds involved to these collaborative agencies for their time, effort, and energy, that we bifurcate funds. What I'm talking about is allowing people in the room who certainly have something to offer that could assist us and those collaborative members of doing a better job. That's what I'm talking about. So what I'd like to ask of you is if you could get back to me, if this isn't coming back to this committee, if you could get back to me, Councilman Tony Cardenas, my office, about what we can do to increase that collaboration with or without funds to that other organization, because I think that what is half the battle here is that we make sure that we're trying to be as, and I hate this word because people, as progressive as possible when it comes to being as inclusive and holistic as possible in meeting our objectives. Because the objectives of this, as you stated earlier, is that all victims are served, right? Regardless, men, women, boys, girls, remember you said that and we...
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't believe there's anything to indicate that's not happening.
No,
So-
you're not listening to me.
No, I understand. I'm going to do everything you said, and I work with Michael very closely on these issues, and I will convey what you said to the lead agency and try and see how they will respond, and I will report back. Is that what you'd like? I will do all of that. I'm happy to do all of that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And I believe Ms. Sheedy is committed to progress on this issue.
And you said that earlier, and then I appreciate you clarifying that, because a lot of people come up here and they say, nobody listens to me, nobody's doing anything. You didn't say that at all, and that's what I appreciate about your testimony. You were being very fair, and you were being very accurate, so thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any further questions? That being the case, this will be approved. Thank you very much, and you'll report back to Mr. Cardenas on progress on that item. Thank you. And for the verbal record, Mr. Zine has joined us now. He was here for that discussion. Mr. Zine, we already dispensed with 8 through 15, which were graffiti awards, and 5 through 7, which were donations, and we've just dispensed with number 1. Number 2 was continued, and we now will move to number 3.
We did number 5, right?
5, yes.
Why is number 2 continued?
Department request.
Department request?
Yeah.
Need to get us more information.
So, item number 3.
Well, who's representing on number 2?
Nobody spoke. Was this the department requested before we?
Okay, because there's another aspect of that I wanted to.
We can come back to it.
You want to bring it up now, or do you just want to talk to the department?
I'll just talk to the department.
Yeah, okay.
M3, communication from the mayor and CEO report relative to the acceptance of the 2009 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Grant
You don't need any help.
award in the amount of $7,316,821 to fund community law enforcement and recovery sites and related actions.
Good morning, Melissa Fleming with the CAO. I'm joined by Julie Crane with the Mayor's Office. We're here about the fiscal year 09 Justice Assistance Grant, or the JAG grant. It does provide about $7.3 million to the city, but the city acts as the administrative agent for 59 total areas, jurisdictions within the area. So the city's actual allocation of the award is only about $5.6 million, of which $2 million will be funding the community law enforcement and recovery sites, or CLEAR sites.
Anything else? Question for you. We've asked for this a number of times in the Budget and Finance Committee. It's still a concern. I see $500,000 of this goes to the mayor's office. How many people are working in the mayor's office on law enforcement grants?
In the mayor's office, we
Your name,
have
please.
about,
Your name, please.
Julie Crane, Mayor's Office of Homeland Security and Public Safety. In the Mayor's Office of Homeland Security and Public Safety, we have quite a large grants unit. There's about 7 accountants, and on DOJ grants, we have about 4 people working on them, and Homeland Security grants, we have about 6 or 7 people working on them. The reason for the $500,000 is because of the large amount of work associated with managing these grants. This is the first time, or this is actually the second grant that we've got where the City of LA is the fiscal agent for the rest of the county and the jurisdictions within the county. The first grant was the Recovery Act. So going forward, Department of Justice will have the City of LA as the fiscal agent. So due to that, we have a lot of reporting requirements, a lot of financial reporting, financial monitoring, and all of these take up a great deal of staff time and resources.
Okay. Well, if I equate it out real quickly in my head, that's about 18 people, which is the size of an actual city council staff. And we do that for under $1 million. We run our staffs, and here's $500,000 on just this one grant. And I see time and time again large amounts of money going to the mayor's office for administration. And it almost looks to me, and we've said this in Budget and Finance, it looks like you get more money in your share of grants than you have people to pay with it. So we're going to continue to ask this question. And if we have to, ask the controller audit that. But it just seems like time and time again, we see large amounts of money going to the mayor's office, and the number of people in that staff don't equate to that kind of money.
To clarify, this is also a 4-year grant. So that amount is over 4 years.
It's spread out 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, percentage-wise, it's still 20% of the
Still,
grant.
yeah.
It's 7% of the total grant amount.
I have a question then. How much is the overall grant?
The overall grant is $7.3 million.
7.3. Okay. And then how much of that is going to the administration or the mayor's office, as the chairman pointed out?
About $500,000
$500,000 total.
total.
Okay. So I was looking at 2.5 million here, and then of that 512,000 is going for management and administration.
But we administer the entire $7 million, is what
Correct.
you're saying? Okay.
I have a question. I've as chair of the ad hoc committee that no longer exists, we've had these JAG grants before us, and one of the things that I asked of the mayor's office is to incorporate the public defender's office within the CLEAR teams. And I'd like to know what the status is on that. Does anybody know?
I'd like to call up Peter Shutan from the City
Sure.
Attorney's Office.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good morning. Peter Shutan, City Attorney's Office. I know that there had been just some discussions in the past, Councilman, regarding that issue. I did not know personally that that was still a request of the council. I can certainly, we have had those discussions at the Clear Executive Board level, but no decision has been made to incorporate the public defender. It is a law enforcement team that discusses strategies and different aspects of what we're doing on the ground, and developing strategies for each of the 9 teams that we have. They come in and report what's going on at each of the teams. But at this point in time, I'd be glad to re-examine that issue and certainly discuss further with you and your staff. But I can take it back to the Clear Executive Board and indicate that you're requesting that we consider that.
Absolutely. They're very well aware of that request, and I remember there was preliminary dialogue in response to that, which you just clarified, that a lot of strategy goes on or what have you. Having the public defender's office involved in those strategies or what have you might not make much sense. I get that, but the fact of the matter is there's ways in which things could be agendized, and public defender's office could actually be helpful in assisting with certain strategies, and then when those other things are taking place, that could be done without them in the room.
If I could add that as it relates to certain prosecutions and certain types of cases, we have been working with the public defender, and as the councilman knows, especially as it relates to some of the injunction cases and the removal petition, and we do work fairly closely with them in terms of the dealing with some of the diversion and the exit ramps that we've discussed quite a bit. So there is some discussion there with regard to our office. But because the Clear Executive Board is a multi-agency, it's not quite as easy to change policy or to change strategies, and I would be more than glad to take that back to the Clear Executive Board.
Yeah, when I make requests or what have you, unfortunately, I don't make them based on how hard or how easy they are, but just based on whether or not I think it might make good policy sense for us to incorporate those changes. So I look forward to that, a more accurate response from once you get a response back from the board. I think it's very important that we follow up with that. Since you brought up the fact that you've been collaborating more with the Public Defender's Office on other aspects, and thank you very much, many of those requests came out of the dialogue from that committee. Would you opine that those collaboratives have improved the processes and the end results that everybody's trying to achieve, or it's kind of maybe not so much?
No, I think to the extent that we've incorporated them into our discussions and our strategies for exit ramps from the injunction, I think they have been effective and continue to be. But that's a much more specific.
I'm not saying that they're the same. I just, since you brought it up, I just want to know how things are going. Okay.
I don't think we'd have done it if we didn't.
Not the worst idea then.
No, not the worst idea.
Good. All right. I'll set
Definitely not the worst.
Okay. Look forward to your response. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zine?
Regarding the administrative fees, the $500,000, the folks that are working in the mayor's office monitor this. Each jurisdiction monitors it also, correct?
Each jurisdiction is responsible to the City of LA as the fiscal agent for reporting, providing all sorts of backup for audits.
So they have their own internal audits when they receive the grant money as part of this project.
They need to be in compliance with the grant. So whatever processes they need to institute in their city, they should already exist.
Okay. And then the grants that we receive, how many grants do we receive annually in this public safety arena?
It varies from year to year, but we receive the JAG grant every year. It's a formula grant. In addition to the formula grant, if we apply for competitive grants, maybe we get one a year. We also are awarded one earmark a year. And
the folks that are working on the mayor's office monitoring this, are they responsible for just one grant, or do they do multiple grants?
Again, it varies, but the majority of the time we are responsible for all of the grants.
So with all the
So we
people,
split responsibilities.
there are about 17 people working in this particular operation.
There are, for this particular grant,
No, the grant department within the mayor's office, the grant section.
there are about 15 people.
About 15 people.
Hmm.
Now, those people are assigned to one or multiple?
Multiple,
Multiple.
yes. Half of those are accountants, and half of those are grant specialists and contract specialists.
Now, does the CAO or the CLA also duplicate this effort?
No,
So the only operation taking place with grants is within the mayor's office?
correct.
The police department, the fire department, no other department deals with grants?
They have their own grants.
They have their own grants, but who's administering them and who's monitoring them and who's checking to make sure it's done properly?
In LAPD, they have their own grants unit where they can apply for and manage their
Okay,
own
so now
grants.
we duplicated the effort. That's what I'm trying to get to, is we've taken an effort to get federal dollars or state dollars, and then we have checks and balance within the mayor's office. We have checks and balance from the police department, checks and balance from the fire department. So we've got a lot of checks and balance, and the money that's going down to the field to do the job is reduced in this particular case by $500,000. That's the concern I have, is that we've duplicated this check and balance. So maybe the controller needs to do an audit and put this in one particular section so we can coordinate that and eliminate some of the expenditure that's going to oversee the grants. Because it appears to me that we're duplicating these efforts, and every time we duplicate an effort, we're reducing the funding for the field, for the CLEAR program, or any other program that is out there protecting people in the city of Los Angeles, whether it be police, fire, or some other, because I know we get a lot of grants for different programs.
From the grants perspective, when let's say Department of Justice releases a solicitation for a grant,
Right.
it details who can apply for the grant. And in some cases, it has to be a law enforcement agency, and in some cases, it has to be a unit of government. So that sort of distinguishes who applies for and manages the grant. I think in the case of the ICAC, for example, LAPD, a law enforcement agency needs to apply for it, so LAPD would
So
apply
I'm
for
saying
that.
they have their own grant section, and the mayor's office has its own grant section. Maybe the city attorney has a grant section too.
But we do
We've
all
got a lot of
collaborate.
grant sections, and we're taking money that can go to the effort of actually doing the job versus the overall perspective of watching the dollars. I'm not against watching the dollars and controlling it, but I think that we may be a little top-heavy when it comes to the grants, and what we're doing, and Mr. Smith and I have been talking about this for a long time, it hasn't seemed to improve. We still have accountants doing their thing, we still have grant writers doing their thing. Maybe we need one nice grant office to do the whole thing, and the police department's part of the city, and the city's part of the overall picture. I just have some real concerns about how we're taking, in this particular case, $500,000 to do something where every other city is getting part of this. 59 cities, they're all doing the same thing. We're doing this thing so many times over, and all those dollars aren't going in the field to help what needs to be done.
Ms. Perry?
I just have some real issues about this.
Have you thought about
And
doing,
it just continues.
have you thought about just doing a motion to consolidate operations?
I think that's, and then the oversight, because we've got the oversight with
Have
it.
do you want to do something?
That was kind of, I think it was in the controller's audit, actually, was that we need to be consolidating more
Why don't
grant
we go ahead
functions.
and
I think we should do
lift
that.
that language out and get started on it.
This has been a continuing saga, and it doesn't seem to improve. So, let's do that.
We actually used to have a grants board, which was the mayor's office, council, and a committee that oversaw all grants of the city. And that was in the audit report, was we need to really focus our grant actions. Consolidate.
This next budget, we're going to have to consolidate a lot of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we'll do a
Do you have
motion
more?
on it.
No, I was just wondering, Ms. Perry, you and Dennis are going to work on that?
I'm happy to join with them. It sounds like they've been working on it for a long time.
We'll do a motion together.
Yeah,
Dennis and you.
I'd be happy to sign on and
Okay.
support your effort.
Thank you.
All right, because if you weren't, I would, but that would be a,
I think we can all-
no, that would be a majority of the committee, so
Okay,
it'd
that's
be
right,
you
yeah,
two.
you're right.
We'll flip a coin and figure it out.
No, you two.
Short straw.
Short straw.
I'm busy already.
It's good to have that much support.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
If there are no other objections, we'll go ahead and move the report and accept the CAO's recommendations. And move to item number 4.
We're on this one, do we?
No.
Item 4, motion Rosendahl Reyes requesting the city attorney, in conjunction with the Department of Transportation, prepare an ordinance prohibiting the harassment of bicyclists in the city of Los Angeles.
Michelle Mallory, Senior Bicycle Coordinator, Department of Transportation. The idea is to create an anti-harassment ordinance that would help protect bicyclists in the city. Essentially, I'm sure many of you have heard this in council, and it's kind of been an ongoing issue, especially following the sentencing of the doctor with the recent Mandeville Canyon incident. The city's attempting to make the city more bicycle-friendly through adoption of a new bicycle plan that we're working on, as well as a number of other things like bicycle parking and bicycle education citywide. This is another attempt to try and protect bicyclists a little bit and to make motorists a little more aware of the concerns of bicyclists on the roadway. A number of things happen to bicyclists on a continual basis, on a daily basis, such as vehicles passing very, very close with less than a foot, vehicles speeding up and turning right in front of bicyclists, and then the more malicious things, throwing things, spitting at them, swatting bicyclists with their hands as they go by, yelling at them, honking at them. So these are some of the things that are intended to address, and at this point we're hoping the city attorney will give us feedback as to what we can do legally.
I have a couple questions real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Perry. First of all, most of the things I've read in the motion are already against the law.
Probably true.
So what is it going to be different about what you want to do that's...
There are a few things that are not. And again, I don't know if the city can do this. It's a legal matter, and I'm certainly not an attorney. There are a couple things that currently are not state law. For instance, a number of states have enacted 3-foot passing distance laws that would require motorists to maintain 3 foot of distance from bicyclists. We don't have that in the state of California. There was an attempt.
Excuse me, you're talking 3-foot distance when they're side by side, not that they can get within 3 feet behind them.
Passing from behind or in front of a vehicle. With the recent Mandeville Canyon situation, you know, the motorist braked in front of cyclists. This would be something that would be an extra, again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know how this could be enacted. But
that's got to be state law. We can't do that locally.
We could do a local ordinance.
You do a local ordinance, it becomes it's not an infraction, it's a misdemeanor at best, and that you have to have a police officer see it to enforce it, so.
I'm Judy Reel, Deputy City Attorney, newly assigned to Transportation. So this is something that we would certainly take a real careful look at, work with the council offices that sponsored the motions, but it really does present some unique challenges. This is not, in the area of transportation, as I've learned, you can't have, say, same sort of regulatory authority that you do with respect to an activity that is fixed in the city of LA. For example, if you're going to open a business in the city of LA, you better learn what the city laws are with respect to businesses. Because when you're driving, you can go through 5 or 6 different cities and jurisdictions on one trip. It would be chaos to have each separate jurisdiction have its own rules of the road. So the state says that the state is in charge of the rules of the road unless expressly authorized by the state. And so it's something that we would really need to look carefully. You know, obviously we would try and craft something that we believe is lawful. But my guess is that it's simply not going to be as specific as people may like in terms of regulating vehicle traffic.
What if we ask for a state vehicle code
Yeah,
section?
I was going to say the proper way this motion goes is to ask for legislation and put it in our legislative packet, because I think as the city attorney just pointed out, our restrictions are really guided by the vehicle code, which we do not dictate. And we've had many objections about things in the vehicle code that we can't change, and we're not allowed to exceed the rules of the vehicle code. So I think it's very problematic. I'm willing to let the city attorney take a look at any recommendation you may have. But I would point out that most of the things that you would want that would rest in a city code would be a municipal violation or a municipal code violation, which cannot be enforced by anybody but a police officer. So they have to visually see it. You can't report it. You can't say, this guy ran me off the road, this is a license number. Nothing we can do about it under the law. So I think the restrictions are going to be very, very focused on the vehicle code, which we have no jurisdiction over. So that would be my caution to you. But Ms. Perry?
I just wanted to add there's some new innovative activities in terms of cycling that, you know, I see in the city now, and they're all very grassroots oriented. And as we try to determine what we do, whether we ask the state to amend the vehicle code, a lot of bicycle clubs now, they ride a lot at night in massive numbers. And I don't don't know if people have seen this at night.
And they break every law that's on the books.
Okay, all right, no, I'm not saying that,
Well, be direct.
I'm not saying that, Grandpa.
Well, I've seen it.
Okay.
500 bicycles going down.
My point is this, that the situation has changed in terms of the way people socialize, and they, text each other and meet at a place and ride sometimes in numbers that are 300-400 people at a time. And, I've been in the tunnel when people have been coming through the tunnel at 2nd Street, and you basically have to stop because you're enveloped by a massive crowd of people on bikes. That's something that, didn't used to happen, but it's becoming more and more popular now. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, I just say that it's a situation that has fraught with the possibility of accident. And I don't know how we respond to that other than, when you see that coming, 300 people on bikes coming, you should just stop and wait, because there's not much else you can do. And I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration, for the city attorney's consideration. For me, especially in the downtown area, there's two issues: the cycling clubs at night and messengers who are, very heavily populating downtown, because that's where the core of work is, downtown Mid-Wilshire area, and they congregate in one area and they work very hard. So to me, there's two universes of people who could be affected by whatever we choose to do, whether it's an amendment, whether it's some narrowly drawn ordinance. And Mr. Smith is right, as is Mr. Zine. A lot of these laws are on the books already, but I wanted to highlight the fact that this is a trend that is newly emerged and at least ought to be considered as we deliberate.
We've discussed that before. What's that called?
Well, the group that's on the roads at night is grown out of a concept called Midnight Riders. It started as kind of a critical mass ride at night. It is a social ride and has broken off into several splinter groups. This ordinance, if there were to be an ordinance, is to address lawful cyclists who ride during the daylight. They're riding for transportation, and we have beyond the Midnight Riders social group sort of thing. We're really talking about people who are trying to ride their bicycles for environmental reasons, or because they don't have any other means of transportation. We have a huge group of low-income folks who have no other way to get to work, whether they be hotel workers or maintenance workers who work at night and don't have access to transit at night. And we have a number of people who want to ride the bike because it's the right thing to do rather than continue to pollute. So we have a whole bunch of folks who want to be able to ride their bikes either for social reasons or environmental reasons or just ongoing transportation and fitness reasons. But at the same time, I thoroughly support law enforcement of bicyclists who are breaking the rules as well. I stop at stops. It's a safe thing to do. Blowing a signal is absolutely taking your life in your hands, and I think all cyclists should ride in a lawful manner.
Unfortunately, I think when you ride a bicycle in the city of Los Angeles, you're taking life into your own hands. I see it all the time. I just fear for people who ride their bikes. It's so much so that I don't let my kids ride their bikes around my city. If they're going to want to ride their bike, I'll take them somewhere where there's a bike path, or they can ride in our cul-de-sac, but I don't trust motorists around bicycles. A few thousand pounds versus a couple hundred pounds, bicycle's going to lose easily. But we talked a lot about a lot of the limitations that I think are very real and very accurate. But the one thing that we can control, which I read into, unless it's explicit in this motion, is that what we can control is awareness campaign for motorists, awareness campaign for cyclists, awareness campaign for constituents, and also an awareness campaign for our own officers who enforce the vehicle code. And I remember some of the testimony when many of these people came to council. Some of the testimony was that, a guy waving a ticket saying, I got a ticket for something that wasn't even a violation. And when I tried to explain to the officer, look, I'm within the law or what have you, I got the ticket anyway. So whether or not, I'm not saying that person was correct or the officer was wrong or what have you, but it appeared that more than one person seemed to exclaim that they had a similar experience. And also, one of the things that reoccurred over and over and over was that some officers are not showing equal respect to cyclists as they are to pedestrians and or motorists. For example, one of the cyclists actually explained that he himself was injured very badly in a bicycle accident with a motor vehicle, and that when he tried to get the officer to respond to the accident, etc., that the officer seemed to play it off as though, well, there's nothing I can do, which I would imagine if there was a hit-and-run accident, vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to pedestrian, I've never heard somebody tell us in council that on that kind of incident that they were ignored. But here we have somebody coming to the podium on public testimony telling us that that is emphatically the truth. It happened to him personally, and to try to explain that to the city council, I think that it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we do fortify what we can control, which is an awareness campaign within the city, and I think that's part of what this ordinance talks about. Awareness campaign not only to the general public, pedestrians, motorists, and cyclists, but also fortifying what we can do is making sure that our officers do in fact understand the requirements and the laws and how to enforce them when it comes to cyclists. And to Ms. Perry's point, I remember reading a newspaper article of how big these gatherings can get. I think it was Lance Armstrong was in town in Los Angeles, and he does this little thing, I guess you call it tweeting or what have you, and he went ahead and say, hey, I'm going to be around Griffith Park at 7 in the morning or what have you, and they got like 14,000 cyclists, and they did their thing, whatever that meant, but they took pictures and everything, and it was a massive, massive amount of people. So I think that's an anomaly, but again, getting back to this motion, I think we're talking about the day-to-day cyclists, the 1 to 2 people who are trying to get to and from work and trying to make cycling their mode of transportation.
Okay, we have 3 public comments, so if we could have Ted Rogers come forward, Allison Manos, and Risha Smolarski. Morning.
Hi, my name is Arisha Smolarski. I'm with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. I would just like to say that we are seeing a rising amount of cyclists on the road, and as Michelle Maury stated, they're not only the social riders, but they are the people who are going to work, their families, their children. A lot of youth are riding their bicycles. And I think what this ordinance does is it shows the city's commitment to ensuring that they're safe. And they do have equal rights to the road, as does the motorists, but they're not being treated as if they do have equal rights. And this ordinance would make sure that motorists need to respect the fact that they are sharing the space as much as motorists are using the roadway. So what we would like to see is that the motorists are being held accountable for harassing cyclists and pedestrians, and that this be a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by $1,000 fine or a year in jail. And this is similar to something that is already enacted in Missouri, so we wouldn't be recreating something. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allison Manis. I also work for LA County Bicycle Coalition. I understand that there are some legal technicalities with whether it should be referred to the state or whether it's a local jurisdiction. I think it's good to have a local ordinance just to show the commitment, like Arisha says, to cyclist safety. If it does get submitted to the state as a package, I think it's important to request that there's a mandatory cyclist sensitivity training where motorists who violate cyclist safety learn to share the road and have to pay the fine. I think it's important to show on a state and local level that cyclist safety is prioritized over motorists' dangerous, harassing behaviors. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Ted Rogers. I write the blog Biking in LA. In 30 years on as an adult cyclist across the United States, I've found that Los Angeles is the single most dangerous city I've ever ridden in, both due to a lack of adequate infrastructure and a minority of very dangerous drivers. Since I've been writing my blog in the last year and a half, I've heard from hundreds of cyclists who've been harassed and intimidated by drivers. These things include passing too close, lurching towards the cyclist with their car, honking to startle or intimidate, throwing objects, touching, pushing, or hitting cyclists, and yelling at them, like, get on the sidewalk. These things are most likely to happen to less experienced and therefore more vulnerable riders. those who lack the skills and confidence to assertively take the lane. It also was most likely to happen to women who may not feel safe riding on busier streets. May not feel safe riding on less populated side streets, and therefore ride on busier streets. However, this can happen to anyone. Talk to any cyclist, pick one, anywhere, stop one on the street. They will tell you a story of being intimidated or harassed by a driver. I myself have been a victim of a road rage driver. What I would like to see in this ordinance at a minimum should ban all forms of harassment, establish a minimum 3-foot passing distance, give cyclists an unquestioning right-of-way in bike lanes, just like pedestrians enjoying a crosswalk, ban short stopping, lurching towards, or deliberately cutting in front of a cyclist, and, as you pointed out, require LADOT to educate drivers about cyclist rights. In conclusion, I'd like to read you an email that a friend of mine received after the Thompson sentencing the other day. I live in LA, and it really irritates me to see you people riding all over the right-hand lane in traffic. I often imagine running over you and speeding away. I think if I ever had the chance to hit one of you on Sepulveda Boulevard, you know, that long stretch of road near Skirball Center where it sometimes gets lonely, if I ever have the chance to hit one of you and get away with it, I'm going to do it.
Who did that?
This is what we face in Los Angeles.
Were they anonymous?
There is an anonymous name, Berlitz 777.
We can find out.
It's a threat.
Turn over to LAPD.
Turn it over to PD?
Yeah,
That's what I
site
recommended to
management.
him, yes.
That's a threat.
But unfortunately, this is not a unique threat. I tried to copy down other things I saw on various news sites on Friday. Most of them had been deleted because they were threats. But there were hundreds of these threats online on Friday.
Thank you very much.
And this is what we face on a daily basis, even if they're not, in writing. As we're riding to work, as we're riding to go shopping, this is the way people are feeling on a daily basis, and that's something that we need to address.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karnas. You have another?
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, if you could help my office in giving us your opinion, if you could go through the handbooks that they give out when people are getting a driver's license, and give us your opinion as to whether or not they pretty much omit any education on cyclists' rights and obviously sharing the road, right?
Yeah.
You should understand their rights in order to understand your responsibilities as well as a motorist. And that's one of the things I'll be more than happy to send to people I know in the legislature to try to see if they can implement. It should be done administratively. It shouldn't require legislation. But what they can do is through, for example, when I chaired in the legislature, the Budget Committee on Transportation, it wasn't a policy committee, but we were able to implement a lot of things through there, getting the attention of the department, talking about their budget, and then all of a sudden they find a will and a way to go ahead and change some of their policy that didn't require legislation. So we're more than happy to help you with that. But I need your opinion first. I'm trying to think back the times that I've read the book. My son's doing it right now. I glanced through it, and I don't remember seeing much, if anything, about cyclists.
Very minimal.
And whether we like it or not, we share the road. In addition to that, with this new president and his administration, they're talking about carbon footprints, they're talking about green, they're talking about new ways of transportation, et cetera, all in and around reducing our carbon footprint. I would imagine that we could probably see some new funding, transportation funding, specifically around cycling and encouraging that, assisting us with getting better, as you mentioned, sir, putting better infrastructure in there to make it safer and much more fortified infrastructure for people to cycle, get people on bikes. Secondly, I think that the new angle now on transportation for your purposes would be the fact that if we're going to encourage a reduction of carbon footprint city by city, cities could commit to that kind of infrastructure if they give us some money, and then on top of that, we can go ahead and fortify our communities with better roadways and paths for cycling in general.
If I can make one response to that, you're absolutely right that what drivers don't realize is that every bike they see that's in their way that they complain about, that's one car that's not in their way. Cars are a lot bigger, they take up a lot more space than we do.
The problem they have is that they're not bothered so much with the car as long as they're going the same speed as them.
except the more cars you have, the slower
No,
traffic
no, I'm
goes.
not arguing with you. I'm just saying the mentality of a lot of people is, you know, they
I
don't
have-
see half the other half.
So
I have a clarifying question, or maybe go ahead
that
and then.
concludes our public comment unless there's something new you
I
want
have
to
a
add.
clarifying question. So I respect, and I'm encouraged that you're, seeing that we need to have more bicycle infrastructure, but I'd like to hear your response as to, specifically to the anti-harassment, which I think is something that goes in addition
That's
to
what the
infrastructure.
motion asks us to do, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to instruct the city attorney to come back with a list of recommendations, because, quite frankly, most of what you've asked for is either already in the law or in state jurisdiction, not in the city of LA's, but the city attorney wants to opine on that. This motion directs the city attorney to draft an ordinance. I would rather send it back to the city attorney, Department of Transportation, report back with options that we have available to us. Those things that are not in state law that we can do, and those things that are in state, that need to be in state law, that we need to put into our legislative package.
Okay.
So if that would meet with the approval of the committee.
Report back.
I just have a couple comments on this. I started out many years ago, the Mayor Bradley appointed me to the Bicycle Advisory Committee. That's where I started out in government, along with law enforcement. As far as what you're talking about, harassment of bicycle riders, who's going to be enforcing that? The local police agencies. If we have an ordinance, whether it be a local ordinance or a vehicle code section, it's going to come down to the officer who sees that violation to make the enforcement. The individual who's riding the bicycle who may be harassed by the motorist, if they write down the license number, if they have it video, they can capture that. Maybe there'll be some kind of prosecution, but most of the time, it's going to depend on an officer who observes it to take action to cite the individual into court, and what happens after that is part of the criminal justice process. When it comes to the congestion, you mentioned the Sepulveda Pass. They think they're starting today the San Diego Freeway, which means Sepulveda Pass is going to be more congested, and I ride a motorcycle, a bicycle, and drive a car, so I've seen all aspects of it. Traffic in Los Angeles is getting worse. It's not getting better. The roads are congested. And my heart goes out to the bicycle riders. If you're on a bicycle path, you're in the Balboa Park, you're riding in that area, you're safe and secure. But when you're riding on a public roadway, you are really jeopardizing yourself because people don't pay attention to that. And with all the congestion, the bottom line is the car is looking at the menacing car and a bicyclist. Well, we know the balance, and Mr. Cardenas discussed that even with his own children. So whatever law takes effect, whatever, if we do a local ordinance or a vehicle code, it's going to take law enforcement to do it. And I will be candid, law enforcement has a whole lot of priorities on the plate. And it sends a good message that we're concerned about bicycle riders, we're concerned about their safety. But the fact of the matter is, we are not a bicycle-friendly city. If you look at the lack of roadways we have that are established for bicycles. We have a bike path, we have a bike route, but when you look at the bicycle riders and you look at the cars, just it happened on Mandible Canyon, I read that story a number of times, that's a tragedy that hopefully won't happen again, but oftentimes people just don't care about the bicycle riders. We need to be more understanding, and hopefully we can do something to enhance the roadways so they can be wider, because when you talk about the 3-foot radius, that driver of the car and 3 foot between that car and that bicycle rider and the parked car, is there actually that distance so they can travel around the road clearly, and at the same time an officer can have to observe that in order to cite someone. So there's so many factors in it, but I support the cause that you're going for, and hopefully maybe some recognition either in the driver's handbook or the driver's test. But the fact of the matter is, it's very dangerous to ride a bicycle other than on a bike route, or in particular a bike path is the safest place. But people, as you say, use it to go back and forth to work. And they're competing with the parked cars, people opening their doors, and commuters down the roadway, and buses and everything else we have to contend with in this city.
And it's a matter of whether or not you're going to support safety, or if you're going to continue to support a city that's not bike-friendly, whereas all the other cities in the nation are moving forward to become more bike-friendly. And I feel that, yes, it's very dangerous to drive a car as well. There are thousands and thousands of deaths a year. And I think if we choose a mode of transportation on the street, we should be protected by the law. Everybody, all users of the road, equally. And I understand that you're coming from one perspective that has been sort of the case in Los Angeles, but things are changing. And I think that, as you mentioned, Barack Obama and other leaders in this nation, as well as in the also internationally, are showing visible steps in making those changes. And we can't continue to just cater to the motorists. We have to cater to
Thank you
all
very
of
much.
us.
That's enough. We heard what you had to say. We're going to ask City Attorney and DOT to come back with a report of options available to us, and we'll go forward. Thank you very much. That concludes today's agenda. This is the time for public comment for any item not on today's agenda. We have one request for public comment. Phyllis Doherty.
Thank you. Before I start my time, could I make a thank you to Mr. Cardenas?
Quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, maybe I better do it afterwards. Looks like he's occupied. First of all, I would like to encourage you to address the issue of administrative citations as soon as you can. It was brought in the end of August and has not yet appeared on your agenda. Mr. Zine was on the radio the other night saying that he would like to use them for the cameras. Maybe it's something that you could apply to this harassment of bicyclists, where it's not actually, a physical threat, but still it's enough where the money comes directly back into the city funds. And I think the sooner we have the entire package.
I think we've asked for a report back from the CAO on that, and it's going to go to Budget and Finance probably.
In this committee?
Yeah.
Not yet. I don't think it's come up yet in committee, and it's waiting to it's waiting to come up here.
We'll check on it and see. I thought we were talking about administrative fines and stuff go to Budget and Finance, so.
Okay, I think it was assigned here, and it's still waiting, I believe. Now I'm going to have to go very quickly, but I just want to encourage you, the rather fringe benefit or fringe element of the animal movement has already started their move to get a no-kill general manager for LAAS, which of course is the kiss of death to everybody, not only the animals, but also to the department. I want to encourage you, since the Department of Animal Services is not a charter department, to consider not appointing to that position. The council has control over it, and I think you can more or less make the rules. It does not have to go under the charter rules, where within a year you have to have a general manager for a couple of reasons. You're thinking of giving it away, disposing of it, farming it out, whatever you want to do. And it's not fair to even consider. You would not get good candidates, because anybody who's capable of getting a good job certainly is not going to come in for a department that may be just abolished quickly. We have good people in charge right now. May I finish? Personnel is doing well. Our auxiliary departments are doing well. They're happy. SIACA, the county, everybody's happy with the way Linda Barth and Kathy Davis are doing this. Linda now is really learning what it takes to administer a department. She's not under Mr. Boakes anymore. The last two general managers have resulted not only in embarrassment and a waste of time and money, but also in lawsuits under both of them. The one regarding the stew dog was basically Mr. Stuckey, and then we know what happened with Mr. Boakes. So I just want to really encourage you to not fill that position. Wait and see what happens. Let's use that over $200,000. We're talking about laying off the employees in the shelter. We need to get away from this no-kill. It's a ridiculous concept. A lady was just convicted for having the skulls of 7,000 animals on 26 acres because she was conducting a no-kill. And it is not kind to overcrowd these shelters and wait for those animals to kill each other or get so sick that they die so that we can say we didn't kill them. If an animal is inappropriate, the state law now no longer compels us to hold them a long period of time. After 72 hours, they can make a very good decision, and we can keep the animals that are adoptable and would be good in homes. We don't want more tragedies like what happened with little Omar Martinez yesterday with the dog in the yard. And there are reasons that this is happening, and part of it is because we're not being sensible about what we're doing with animals. I just want to say something very briefly. Mr. Cardenas, I just want to thank you for bringing Mr. Green up, and to tell you that I'm inviting him to attend the human trafficking meeting with me for LAPD, because one of my big concerns is the young boys that are brought into trafficking. They have no life. What it does to them is forever. So I'm going to invite him, or I've already invited him to join. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Doherty, just for your information, that report you're requesting was sent to the one committee. We have not received a response yet from the CLA, so we're waiting for that to come through.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much. Go bike ride.
No. I'm sorry, it's going to go to council. And the reason why is it's referred to two committees.
I can understand why people broke into that hole.
The Transportation Committee requested that the ordinance be done as the motion. We can go through it. They already heard it, and they already said, hey, city attorney, make the ordinance. Say it again? Come on. Sorry. That's up to me.